It happened on a night when the city lights looked colder than usual. A man in a dark suit stepped out of a sleek black car, the hum of the engine fading behind him. He paused only long enough to straighten his tie before walking toward the restaurant's glowing entrance. The rain had just begun, thin and hesitant, tapping against the pavement like someone whispering for attention. That was when the old man approached him. Frail, shivering, holding a small paper cup as if it were the last warm thing left in his life. The businessman didn't even stop. He brushed past him with a stiff shoulder, muttering something sharp under his breath. The old man staggered back, the cup slipping from his fingers and rolling near the gutter. For a moment, the street held its breath. This is stories that heal the heart, where ordinary streets and quiet nights become places where truth rises and where forgiveness still has the power to save what pride once destroyed. Here, we tell human stories, not polished, not perfect, but real, the kind that linger long after the world walks away. If you've ever wished you could rewrite a moment or wondered what might happen if compassion had spoken a little sooner, stay with me. Tonight's story is for anyone who has ever turned away and later realized they shouldn't have. No one passing by noticed the way the old man looked at the businessman's face, a look that flickered between hope and recognition before sinking into something like resignation. No one noticed the way the man's expensive wallet slipped from his jacket as he hurried into the restaurant. No one noticed the photograph tucked inside it, worn at the edges, but someone would. And when she did, everything he thought he knew about his past would come undone. Rain softened the street, blurring the reflections in the puddles. A bus rumbled by, spraying water against the curb. A neon pharmacy sign flickered, humming faintly in the distance. Inside the restaurant, laughter rose and fell like music, warm and bright. Outside, the old man bent slowly to pick up the empty cup, his fingers trembling as he wiped dirt from its rim. There was something in the way he lifted his head, a quiet, aching familiarity. But the businessman was already disappearing into the glow of the dining room, unaware of what he had just walked away from. This is the story of a man who believed he had outrun his past, until a single photograph found by someone who loved him forced him to face the truth he buried. A story about pride, about a father forgotten, and about the night a daughter became the bridge between two generations lost to silence. If stories like this remind you that goodness still exists in the cracks of our imperfect world, please like and subscribe. It helps these voices of hope reach someone who might need them tonight. Outside the restaurant, the old man took one last look at the doorway before turning into the rain. The cup held close to his chest. His figure faded into the dim streetlight as if swallowed by the night. And somewhere, just a few feet away on the wet sidewalk, the dropped wallet lay half open, the photograph slightly exposed, waiting for the eyes that would change everything. Tonight we begin with a question the heart never forgets. What happens when the person we cast aside carries the piece of us we lost? He left the restaurant later than planned, stepping back into a night that felt heavier than the one he had walked through before. The rain had grown steadier, drumming against awnings and forming small rivers along the sidewalk. The city was winding down, but there was still a quiet pulse in the air. The distant hiss of tires, the soft hum of neon lights, the rustle of wind pushing discarded newspaper sheets across the street. He loosened his tie, exhaling as if the evening had drained something he didn't want to admit he'd lost long ago. He didn't notice the empty cup near the gutter, nor the faint imprint of a hand in the rain puddle beside it. He didn't notice the absence of the old man. He didn't even notice the weight missing from his pocket. He walked quickly toward his car, eager to escape the cold. The street lamp above him flickered, casting a trembling reflection across the wet pavement. It was there, under that unsteady light, that something small caught his eye. Not meaning, not emotion, just a sliver of paper down by the curb where rainwater carried stray leaves. But he ignored it, stepping over it with the careless confidence of someone who had long forgotten how to see anything but his own world. At home, the lights glowed warm behind the windows. It was a narrow townhouse, elegant and carefully designed, the kind of place where everything had its place except truth. His daughter sat on the living room floor, legs crossed, homework spread around her. She looked up when he closed the door behind him. She had the kind of eyes that still carried softness, the kind that searched people instead of judging them. Eyes too gentle for a house that echoed with quiet tension. "You're late," she said with a faint smile. "Work." He set his keys on the table, patting his jacket, the casual gesture turning into something sharper. He checked the other pocket, then the inside of his coat. His expression twitched. "Have you seen my wallet?" She shook her head. He turned away quickly, running a hand through his hair. "It must have fallen somewhere," he muttered, though the irritation in his voice hinted that he blamed the world before blaming himself. Later that night, while he paced the entryway, searching the same spot repeatedly, she stepped outside to shake off the tension of the house. Sometimes she walked without a reason, down one block, then another, letting the cool air ease what the walls inside tightened. She stopped near the corner cafe, where rain made the light from its windows ripple across the sidewalk. Something dark lay on the ground near the curb. A leather wallet, soaked but intact. She hesitated, lifting it gently. The leather was familiar. She opened it under the cafe awning, shielding it from the rain. Receipts, cards, folded papers. And then, hidden behind the last transparent sleeve, a photograph. Old and discolored, edges frayed from years of being handled. A man holding a small baby in his arms. The man looked young in the picture, younger than her father was now. His face worn but proud. There was something in his eyes, something tired and soft and unmistakable. She had seen those eyes before, hours earlier, on the street, in the rain, the old man with the cup. Her breath caught, the world narrowing to that single realization. Rain tapped softly above her, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat that had waited too long to speak. She felt a sting behind her eyes but held it back, tracing the edge of the photograph with her thumb. The old man's face, the one her father had shoved away without listening, was the same face holding the baby in this photograph. She closed the wallet slowly, as if handling a truth that might break if touched the wrong way. When she came back home, he was still searching, his frustration sharper now. She stood in the doorway, holding the wallet close to her chest. The house felt suddenly too small for what she had to say. "I found this," she whispered. He turned, relief flashing across his face. Relief that vanished the moment he saw what she was holding. The wallet. Wet. Mud at the edges. As if the rain had tried to clean more than just the leather. "Where did you—" She didn't answer. She opened the wallet silently and took out the photograph. She held it up between them. His face changed, not gradually, but all at once, as if some old part of him had been struck without warning. "Dad, who is he?" she whispered. He swallowed hard. The air in the room felt thick. "It's complicated." She stepped closer, her voice trembling but steady. "No, it's not complicated. You pushed that man tonight. The one asking for food. He looked at you like he knew you, and you didn't even look at him." He sat down slowly, as if his legs no longer trusted him. He covered his face with both hands, elbows resting on his knees. Rain drummed against the window, matching the silence inside. "He left us," he said finally. "When I was young. I told myself I didn't need him. that I'd never need him. I built my life without him." His voice cracked. "But he didn't leave because he wanted to. He left because he was broken. And I never let him explain." His daughter knelt in front of him, placing the photograph beside his hand. The image seemed to glow faintly in the warm light. Father and son, a memory that time had tried to bury but never erased. "You have to find him," she whispered. "He looked hungry. He looked cold. He looked alone." He lifted the photograph, staring at it as if seeing it for the first time in decades. His fingers trembled in the same way the old man's had when he held the cup. "I don't know where to start," he murmured. She stood and offered her hand. "Then we start with the streets." He couldn't have gone far. Outside, the rain softened into a mist, carrying the faint scent of wet pavement and distant hope. Father and daughter stepped out into the night, walking side by side, searching the alleys and corners where forgotten souls linger. They called out softly, peering under street lamps, passing shuttered shops and empty bus stops. The city seemed to bend around their footsteps, as if guiding them through the places where pride had once kept him from looking. A woman sweeping the entrance of a bakery looked up when they passed. "Are you looking for someone?" she asked gently. "A man," the daughter said. "Older, thin, wearing a gray coat." The woman nodded slowly, pointing down the street. "He was sitting near the overpass earlier. Looked like he was waiting for someone." They walked faster, the businessman clutching the photograph tightly. Every shadow felt like a possibility, every flicker of light a heartbeat. He didn't speak, but his daughter could see the storm inside him. Regret, longing, fear that he was already too late. When they reached the overpass, the bench beneath it was empty, except for one thing: a small paper cup resting on its side, still holding a few drops of rain. He picked it up with shaking hands, staring at it as if it were the most fragile thing he'd ever held. She watched him kneel, the weight of years bending his back. The photograph in one hand, the cup in the other, past and present finally touching. Behind them, a cart rattled softly. A man pushing it slowed, looking closely at the businessman's face. "Are you his son?" he asked quietly. The businessman turned, breath unsteady. "Do you know him?" The cart pusher nodded, eyes softening. "He talked about you. Every night. Said he was looking for the right moment. Said he wanted to give you something before he couldn't anymore." The businessman stepped closer. "Where is he?" The man pointed toward a shelter down the block. "He went there, said he was tired, said he hoped tomorrow would be the day." Father and daughter exchanged a look heavy with fear and hope. And then they ran, toward the shelter, toward the truth, toward the man who had been waiting in the shadows of their lives for far too long. He didn't remember when the rain became part of the night, only that it softened the sharp edges inside him as he and his daughter walked toward the shelter. The streetlight stretched long reflections across the pavement, turning every puddle into a blurred mirror. He kept glancing at the photograph, the corners damp and curling from the weather as if the past itself were trying to breathe again. His daughter walked close to him, not speaking, her presence steady in a way he hadn't earned, but desperately needed. When they reached the shelter's entrance, a dimly lit doorway beneath an old awning, he hesitated. The hum of fluorescent lights seeped through the cracked glass, along with the distant shuffle of footsteps and quiet coughs. It struck him how unfamiliar places like this were to him, how he'd spent years driving past them with the windows rolled up, never wondering who stayed behind those walls. Inside, the air was warm but tired. Folded blankets sat on a table. A pot of soup simmered in a corner kitchen. A volunteer with kind, alert eyes approached them. "Looking for someone?" she asked softly. He tried to speak but found the words tangled. His daughter stepped forward instead. "An older man," she said. "Thin. Gray coat? He was on the street earlier tonight." The volunteer's expression changed, a faint recognition passing through it. "Yes. He came in a few hours ago, exhausted. Said he'd been walking all day." She nodded toward a hallway. "He's resting in the back." His heart pounded as they followed her. The photograph clenched so tightly that the edges dug into his palm. The hallway was narrow, lined with soft yellow light and the faint smell of laundry detergent and rain-soaked clothes. He stopped near a half-open door. Inside, a single cot stood near the window. An old coat hung on a hook. A pair of worn shoes rested neatly beside the bed. And on the pillow, as if he had placed it there with tenderness rather than exhaustion, lay a folded piece of paper. He stepped inside slowly, the room suddenly much smaller than it looked from the hall. He reached for the paper, unfolding it with hands that felt heavier than they had moments before. It was a note, written in shaky handwriting. He recognized the loops and slants. "If tomorrow comes," it said, "I will try again." He sat on the edge of the cot, the words sinking into him like cold water. Try again, to speak, to approach, to be forgiven. He felt a memory stir, the sound of a door closing, a suitcase being dragged across a wooden floor, the echo of footsteps leaving. He had told the world for years that his father had abandoned him, but he remembered now how he had shut his own heart long before he shut the door. His daughter stood behind him, reading the note over his shoulder, her breath warm and steady. "He's still trying," she whispered. "After all this time." He closed his eyes, letting that truth settle into the cracks he'd ignored for years. Outside the window, drops of rain clung to the glass, each one catching the light. He traced one with his finger, as if following a path backwards through time. He remembered a kitchen, small, cluttered, filled with the smell of bread and soap. His father standing at the counter, hands worn from factory work, wiping his brow and trying to smile even though life had pressed him thin. He remembered the way his father would place a small toy car beside his plate every morning before leaving for work, whispering, "For later, when I get home." He remembered the waiting. He remembered the night he didn't wait. He remembered the anger. He remembered believing that leaving first meant winning. But sitting here now, in this dim shelter room, he understood too late that no one wins when love loses. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, soft, uneven, familiar. He rose slowly, turning toward the door. The old man entered with the quiet humility of someone who had learned to make himself small in the world. His hair was thin, his shoulders slumped, his coat still damp from the rain, but his eyes, those tired, gentle eyes, lifted when he saw the man standing there. Recognition flickered through them, not with surprise, but with the kind of hope that hurts because it survived too much. The businessman took one step forward. His father hesitated, lowering his gaze as if bracing for another rejection. "I'm sorry," the businessman said, his voice breaking as the words left him. It wasn't enough. It wasn't even close, but it was the first true thing he had said in years. His father's breath trembled. He clutched the doorknob, gripping it as if it were the only solid thing in the room. His daughter stepped forward, placing the photograph gently into the old man's hands. "We found this," she whispered. "It belonged to him, and he didn't know how to come back." The old man's fingers curled around the photo, holding it as though it might crumble if he didn't handle it with reverence. He looked at the image, his younger self holding the baby, and a tear slipped down his cheek. He didn't wipe it away. For a moment, none of them spoke. The shelter hummed quietly around them. A door clicked somewhere down the hall. A kettle whistled faintly in the kitchen. Life continued in small, ordinary ways, unaware of the history kneeling at its center. The old man lifted his head slowly, searching his son's face as if mapping the years between them. He reached out, not with confidence, but with longing. His fingers hovered in the air, barely brushing the sleeve of the man he once carried in his arms. The businessman closed the distance himself. He took his father's frail hand gently, pressing it between both of his. It was cold, lighter than he expected, trembling in a way that made his heart ache. His father's lips parted as if to speak, but the words didn't come. Instead, he looked at his granddaughter, a stranger, and yet the closest piece of family he had left. She smiled at him softly, and something inside him seemed to finally loosen, as though he had been holding his breath for decades. They sat together on the edge of the cot. The businessman placed the photograph on the bedspread, smoothing out its creased edges. His father watched him do it, eyes full of a sorrow that had waited too long and a love that had never left. "I tried," the old man whispered at last. "Every year, every birthday. I came to your street, but I couldn't knock. I thought you hated me." The businessman swallowed hard, the truth cutting deeper than any accusation. "I didn't know," he said. "I told myself stories that made it easier not to look back." His daughter rested her hand gently on her father's shoulder. "But you're looking now." Outside, a bus rumbled past, shaking the window slightly. The old man looked at his son with a tenderness that flickered between pride and regret. "You grew strong," he said softly, "stronger than I ever was." The businessman shook his head. "No, I grew hard. That's not the same thing." Silence settled again, but now it was different. Not the silence of years lost, but the silence of something fragile beginning. The old man shifted slightly, wincing. The daughter noticed first. "Are you hurt?" He shook his head, though the gesture was unconvincing. She helped him lie back gently. His breath steadied, his hand still held by the son who had once walked away from him. The photograph rested on his chest, rising and falling with each breath, past and present rising together. A faint knocking came at the door frame. A volunteer peeked inside. "Everything all right in here?" she asked quietly. The daughter nodded. "We're okay." The volunteer smiled, then left them to the night and their unresolved years. The old man's eyes fluttered closed for a moment, then opened again. "I kept that picture," he whispered, "every day." His son looked at the worn edges, the faded ink, and understood. For the first time, in a long time, he didn't feel like a businessman or a man running from something. He felt like a son, sitting beside the person who had once carried all his weight without complaint. He rested his forehead against his father's hand. His daughter watched them, her own eyes shining with the quiet realization that she was witnessing something sacred, not a reunion, but a return. "He needs a doctor," she said softly. Her father nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "Then we'll get him one," he murmured. He helped his father sit up slowly, supporting his frail body with an arm wrapped firmly around him. He could feel every tremor, every weakness, every year he had missed. But he held on anyway, as if holding on to time itself. Together, the three of them moved toward the hallway, a procession of past, present, and future. The shelter lights cast long shadows behind them, merging into one. And as they stepped into the cool night again, the rain had stopped. The city was quiet. The streets glistened under the streetlights, washed clean. The old man leaned into his son, a soft exhale leaving his lips as if finally believing he didn't have to walk alone anymore. At the hospital, the lights were almost too bright. They flattened shadows and turned every face into a tired reflection of sleeplessness. He walked beside the stretcher while his father was wheeled through the automatic doors, his daughter close behind, clutching the photograph like a fragile bridge that could not be allowed to break. The air smelled of antiseptic and coffee left too long on a burner. Voices murmured, phones rang, doors opened and closed with soft, mechanical sighs. Life and loss moved side by side in every corridor. A nurse with a calm, practiced expression asked his father's name. The old man opened his mouth, but the sound barely came out. The nurse leaned closer. "Sir, your full name?" Her patience was gentle, but there was an edge of routine in it. The businessman watched his father struggle with the answer, his tongue heavy with age and exhaustion. "I've got him," the son said quietly. The nurse turned to him, giving him the kind of look people reserve for social workers or distant relatives obliged to step in. He cleared his throat. "His name is Michael Hart." The words felt unfamiliar coming from his mouth, as if he were introducing a stranger instead of the man who had once carried him home when he fell asleep in the back seat of an old car. The nurse wrote it down, then paused. Relationship to the patient. He didn't answer right away. The silence stretched between them like a wire. "Son," he said at last. The word landed heavier than he expected. The nurse looked up, really looking at him for the first time. Something adjusted in her expression, not shock, but recognition. A story formed in her eyes in an instant. A man in an expensive coat, a frail father, years unspoken. She did not ask the questions her eyes hinted at. She simply nodded and moved on. They were led to a curtained space, the kind that pretends to be a room but never quite manages. His daughter perched on a plastic chair, fingers wrapped around the old man's hand, tracing small circles on his skin with her thumb. Machines beeped softly nearby, measuring breaths, counting heartbeats. The businessman stood at the edge of the bed, unable to sit, unable to rest. He watched the rise and fall of his father's chest. Each breath seemed to call up another memory he had tried to bury. He remembered a small apartment where the paint peeled near the ceiling. He remembered his father sitting on the floor, shoelaces undone, counting coins on the coffee table to see if there would be enough for rent and groceries. He remembered the way his father's hand shook when he signed a paper that took away what little they had left. He remembered shouting. Words he could not swallow back, even now. "If you had been stronger, if you had been smarter, we wouldn't be here." He remembered the way his father's shoulders folded in on themselves, the way he quietly put on his coat and stepped into the hallway, saying he would be back soon. Soon never came the way a child expects. "Dad?" his daughter said softly, breaking through the storm in his head. "Are you okay?" He realized he had dug his nails into his own palms. He forced his fists to relax. "I am trying to be," he answered. A doctor entered, middle-aged, her face lined not from age alone but from years of watching families break and build themselves again inside these walls. She examined the old man with efficient hands, listened to his chest, asked him a few questions in a voice loud enough to cut through his fatigue. When she finished, she turned to the businessman and his daughter. "He is very weak," she said gently. "Dehydrated. Malnourished. His heart is tired." She paused, choosing her next words with care. "This did not start tonight. This has been a long road for him." The businessman nodded, shame burning beneath his skin. "Can you help him?" he asked. "We are already helping," she said, fluids, warmth, rest. Her eyes softened. But he needs more than medical care. He needs people. He needs not to be alone. The daughter tightened her grip on her grandfather's hand. "He is not alone," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Not anymore." The doctor gave her a small, approving smile. "Then stay," she said. "Talk to him, even if he sleeps. Sometimes the body listens through the heart." Then she left, the curtain swaying slightly in her wake. His father's eyes fluttered open, pupils adjusting to the light. He looked from the white ceiling to the wires at his side, then to the two faces near his bed. His gaze lingered on his son, then drifted to the photograph resting on the bedside table. The picture looked even older against the sterile white of the hospital sheet. The image of him as a younger man holding a baby seemed almost out of place here, like a memory that had taken a wrong turn and ended up in the wrong decade. "I did not mean to scare you," his father whispered. The words were slow, but they carried weight. "It is not you who scares me," the businessman answered. "It is everything I refused to see for so long." His father tried to shift, wincing at the effort. The son gently adjusted his pillow, the roles reversed now. "You were always stubborn," his father murmured, a faint shadow of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "Even as a child, you wanted to walk before you could stand. And you let me fall," the son replied, but the accusation that once sat behind that sentence was gone. What remained was realization. "I blamed you for every bruise." His father's eyes clouded. "I failed you," he said. "I did not give you the life you deserved." The businessman swallowed, the words cutting and yet strangely familiar. He had carried them himself for years, but from a different angle. "Maybe you did not give me the life I thought I deserved," he said slowly, "but you gave me everything you had. That is different." His daughter watched them, feeling the air thicken, not with anger this time, but with all the things they had never had the courage to say. She thought of her own childhood, the birthday parties, the new shoes, the private school, the way her father pushed himself at work to give her what he had never had. Now she could see the shadow behind it. Not just ambition, but fear. Fear of becoming the man who had once counted coins on a table. She stood and moved closer to the window, peering through the glass. Outside, the night was fading into a softer darkness. Street lamps blinked against the quiet. A man in a hospital gown shuffled slowly along the sidewalk with a nurse at his side, the world reduced to careful steps and patient guidance. She watched them for a moment, then turned back to her grandfather, seeing the same vulnerability in his thin frame. "Tell me about when he was little," she asked suddenly, surprising them both. Her grandfather blinked. "Who?" he asked. She smiled gently. "My father. Tell me something about him as a child. Not the stories he told me. Yours." The old man hesitated, searching his memory. A softness came over his face. "He used to drag a chair to the sink," he said. "Too small to reach the faucet. He wanted to wash the dishes before I came home from work, wanted to prove he could take care of me." He let out a faint breath that might have been a laugh. "Sometimes I would come home and find more water on the floor than in the sink, but he would stand there, proud, soaking wet, saying, 'Look, Dad, I fixed it.'" The businessman closed his eyes, the image returning with startling clarity. Soap bubbles on the linoleum, the sound of his father's keys at the door, the way he had waited for that sound. He opened his eyes again and found his daughter watching him. There was a question in her gaze, the kind that wondered how someone who once tried so hard to do good had turned into a man who pushed old men away in the rain. "I forgot that boy," he murmured. "Somewhere along the way, I buried him under everything I was trying to outrun." His father reached for his hand, fingers weak but insistent. "He never left," the old man whispered. "He just got tired." A nurse came by, checking the monitors, adjusting an IV line. When she finished, she turned to the old man. "You have family here," she said kindly, more as a reminder than a remark. "That is good." Then she glanced at the businessman. Sometimes people need to hear they can come back before they believe it. Her tone was casual, but the words lodged in his chest. He walked to the small sink in the corner of the room, turning on the water. It ran clear and cold before warming. He cupped his hands under it, watching the way it slid over his skin. The memory of a boy on a chair pressed into the moment like a ghost beside him. He grabbed a thin hospital towel and wrung it out, then returned to the bed. Gently, he wiped the damp cloth across his father's forehead, cleaning away dried rain, dust from the street, the residue of long nights spent outside. His father closed his eyes, surrendering to the care with a mixture of relief and disbelief. It felt like a reversal of time. The son finally doing for the father what the father had once done for him in a cramped apartment with peeling paint and a leaky sink. His daughter watched the scene with a lump in her throat. She thought of the photograph again, of the way her grandfather had held her father as a baby, unaware of what years would carve between them. Now, the circle was closing. Not perfectly, not neatly, but honestly. When a hospital orderly came to reposition the bed, he glanced at the old man and then at the businessman. "You want me to bring in another chair?" he asked casually. "It might be a long night." The businessman nodded. "We are staying," he said. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. The orderly adjusted the bed and left. Silence settled again, but this time it carried a sense of purpose. The television in the waiting area down the hall murmured something about late-night news, but none of them were listening. They were in their own small world, defined by the soft beeping of monitors and the rhythmic rise and fall of a frail chest. The old man's eyes began to close more often, his sentences growing shorter. The doctor had called it fatigue, but there was something else there. The weariness of years spent waiting for a moment that had finally arrived. He seemed to be trying to stay awake, his gaze drifting from his son to his granddaughter, as if memorizing their faces again in this new arrangement. "Rest," his son said quietly. "We are here. We are not going anywhere." His father's lids lowered, then lifted one more time. "Do not run from this," he whispered, "from being mine. From letting me be yours." His fingers tightened briefly around his son's hand, then relaxed. The businessman sat back, feeling the weight of those words settle into him like anchors in deep water. He looked at his daughter, who now held the paper cup on her lap, turning it slowly between her hands. The cheap, crushed cardboard had somehow become as sacred as the photograph. It was the cup that had caught the rain, the cup that had been pushed aside, the cup that now rested in the hands of the next generation, no longer a symbol of begging, but of need shared and finally acknowledged. Outside the window, dawn had not yet come, but the blackness of night had softened into a deep blue. The hospital corridor grew quieter, as if the whole building were holding its breath. In that suspended hour between darkness and light, a son sat beside his father and understood for the first time just how much of his life had been built on a misunderstanding of strength. He reached toward the bedside table, taking the photograph in one hand and the cup in the other. He placed them side by side on the blanket near his father's resting heart. Two objects, one story, broken, but not beyond repair. In the hallway, a janitor pushed a cart slowly past their door, humming a tune that sounded almost like a lullaby. The wheels squeaked rhythmically, marking time. The daughter leaned her head against the back of the plastic chair and closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet orchestra of a hospital waiting for morning. Between the hum of machines and the distant footsteps, there was a space where time seemed to stretch. In that space, the man who had once rejected a beggar in the rain sat beside the father he had cast out of his memory, feeling every missed year settle around them like a thin blanket. Light, but undeniably present. He did not know yet what the morning would bring, but he knew, with a certainty that cut through the last of his denial, that he could no longer pretend this man had nothing to do with him. The first light of morning crept into the room almost shyly, slipping past the blinds in thin, pale stripes. It touched the wall first, then the foot of the bed, then the old man's hands, fragile, veined, resting on the blanket as if afraid to disturb the quiet. The businessman had dozed off for only a moment, head tilted back against the stiff chair, when he felt a gentle nudge on his arm. His daughter whispered, "Dad, he's waking up." He sat forward instantly, the stiffness in his neck forgotten. His father's eyes opened slowly, as though lifting a heavy curtain. They were clouded by fatigue, but clearer than they'd been the night before. For a long moment, none of them spoke. They simply watched the new day gather itself around them. "I thought," his father began, voice thin, "I thought I dreamed you." The son leaned closer. "You didn't." His father's lips trembled into the faintest smile. "Good. Good." He let his eyelids fall again, too tired to hold them open for long. A nurse entered with a clipboard, her tone gentle as she checked the IV lines. "He made it through the night," she said quietly. "That's a good sign. He's weak, but he's fighting." She gave the daughter a reassuring touch on the shoulder before leaving them to the morning stillness. The old man shifted slightly, as if gathering strength. "I didn't expect..." He paused, swallowing. "I didn't expect to see both of you again. Not like this." The daughter moved closer to the bedside. "We should have come sooner," she said softly. "We didn't know. But we're here now." His father looked at her with something like awe. "You look like your grandmother," he murmured. She had eyes like that, calm, seeing everything. The businessman felt something tighten in his chest. He hadn't heard his grandmother's name spoken aloud in years. It carried the weight of childhood, of the kitchen, of warm bread, of quiet nights when his father used to tell him stories until they both fell asleep on the couch. His daughter glanced at him. "Dad," she whispered, "tell him something good, something he should know." He hesitated. Speaking truth had never come easily to him, but maybe the morning demanded something different. "I built a business," he said quietly. "From nothing. Like you once tried to do, and I raised her." He nodded toward his daughter. "She's my whole world." His father opened his eyes again, turning them toward the girl. "He loved you before you even came," the old man whispered. "He told me once, when he was still younger than you are, that he wanted to be the kind of father who never let his child feel small." The daughter looked at her father, surprised. The businessman looked down, ashamed of how far he drifted from that boyhood promise. "I wasn't that man," he said softly. His father shook his head weakly. "You think love is measured by perfection? I failed in ways you will never fully understand, but I loved you. Every day. Even when I didn't know how to stay." A long silence settled between them. Love spoken late still lands deep. The daughter reached into her bag and took out the photograph again, smoothing its worn edges. "Tell us about this day," she said. His father studied the picture for a moment, as if stepping through a doorway only he could see. "It was your first birthday," he murmured. "We didn't have money for a cake, not even for candles. So I took you to the park at dawn. I held you just like that and told you stories about the life I wanted to give you." His voice broke. "I promised you the world." A tear slid down the businessman's face before he could stop it. He'd spent so long believing his father had walked away because he didn't care, but now he could see it. The truth he had never wanted to confront. It hadn't been lack of love. It had been lack of strength and shame and fear of failing twice. His father reached out with trembling fingers and brushed the back of his son's hand. "I meant to come back," he whispered. "Every year, I tried. I walked by your street. I looked through the windows. You were growing up so fast, I thought, maybe you didn't need me anymore." The businessman bowed his head, pressing his hand against his father's. "I needed you every year you weren't there." His father's breath caught, his frail chest rising too quickly. "I know, and I am sorry. More than you will ever know." His daughter felt something inside her shift, like the gentle click of a lock that had been stuck for too long. She placed her hand over both of theirs, completing a circle that had been broken for decades. A soft knock sounded at the curtain. It slid open just enough for a social worker to step inside, a woman with warm eyes and a clipboard held loosely in one hand. "Mr. Hart?" she asked gently. The businessman straightened. "Yes? I'd like to speak with you briefly, if that's all right." He glanced at his father, who nodded faintly. The daughter stayed seated, holding her grandfather's hand while her father stepped into the hallway with the social worker. The corridor smelled of fresh coffee and disinfectant. Nurses pushed carts past them. A man in scrubs laughed softly with a colleague near the elevator. It was a world moving at its usual pace, unaware of the quiet unraveling happening behind the curtain. The social worker spoke softly. "Your father. He's been on the streets for quite some time. He's had several hospital visits in the past year, never stayed long. He refused long-term shelters, said he was waiting for something." She looked into the son's eyes with a kind of understanding only someone who had seen thousands of fractured families could offer. "I think he was waiting for you." The businessman swallowed, unable to form words. "We can help arrange longer care," she continued, "connections to housing programs, recovery options, medical support, but he will do better if he knows he has family." He closed his eyes. For years he had built walls to keep the past from reaching him. Now those walls felt like paper. "I'm not leaving him again," he said. The social worker nodded. "Good, that's what he needs." When he stepped back into the room, his father looked up at him with a question in his eyes, not spoken, but deeply felt. The son sat at the edge of the bed again. "They'll help you," he said softly. "And so will we." His father let out a tremor of relief, the kind that loosened something long locked inside. The daughter looked at her father with a quiet pride. "We'll take him home when he's ready," she said gently. The businessman nodded. "Yes, home." The old man blinked slowly, as if trying to imagine it. A home, a real one. A place where he wasn't a shadow on a street corner or a nameless figure in a shelter line. His breath steadied. "May I hold the photograph?" he asked. His granddaughter placed it back in his hands. He stared at it, tracing the outline of his younger self with a trembling fingertip. "I thought I lost everything," he whispered. "But I see now. Some things wait for us, even when we run from them. His son looked at him, feeling something inside begin to thaw. A question rose before he could swallow it. "Dad, why didn't you knock? All those years, why didn't you knock?" The old man's answer was quiet, fragile, but honest. "Because I didn't think I deserved the door to open." The businessman felt the air leave his chest. He placed a hand behind his father's back, supporting him, holding him close in a way he hadn't since he was a boy. "You always deserved the door," he whispered. "You just forgot how to knock." His father leaned against him, letting the truth rest between them without fear. The daughter watched the two men, one old, one aging, finally allowing themselves to be what time had taken, father and son. She knew this was not the end of the story. This was the moment the healing began. The afternoon stretched slowly across the hospital room, soft and warm, like a hand placed gently on a tired shoulder. The sun had climbed higher, filtering through the blinds in thin golden bands that moved each time someone passed in the hallway. The room felt different now. Not lighter, not exactly, but steadier. As if the three of them were learning how to breathe in the same rhythm again. The old man drifted in and out of sleep. Each time he opened his eyes, he looked around the room as if making sure it wasn't another fragile dream. His son stayed close, rarely sitting, pacing now and then, as though afraid stillness would let the past reclaim him. His daughter watched both of them with the quiet intuition of someone who understood that healing often happens in small, unnoticed exchanges. At one point, the old man stirred, his fingers twitching weakly against the blanket. The son leaned closer. "Dad, do you need something?" His father's voice was barely a whisper. "Water." The businessman reached for the small cup on the tray. Not the paper one from the street, but a plastic hospital cup that felt too clean, too new. He raised it carefully to his father's lips. The old man drank slowly, each sip a tiny victory against the years that had worn him down. When he finished, he let out a long breath, the kind that carried exhaustion and gratitude in equal measure. "You always rushed," his father murmured. "Even now. You walk like you're trying to outrun something." The son paused, the cup still in his hand. "Maybe I was," he said, "but I'm not running anymore." His father closed his eyes as if letting that promise settle into the quiet places inside him. A nurse came in to check the vitals again, gently adjusting the blanket and making notes on her chart. "He's stable," she said softly. "Weak, but stable. And he responds well to your voices. Don't underestimate that." The daughter nodded, her eyes soft. "We'll stay." After the nurse left, the old man turned his head slightly. "I dreamed of you," he whispered, looking at his son. "Over and over. The dream changed as you grew. Sometimes you were the little boy washing dishes. Sometimes you were taller than me. Sometimes you were angry. Sometimes just gone." The businessman's jaw tightened. He sat on the edge of the bed so his father wouldn't have to strain. "I dreamed of you too," he said. "But my dreams were complicated. Mostly, I dreamed of the moment you left." His father swallowed with difficulty. "I never meant to make you carry that moment alone." Outside the window, the day brightened, the light shifting in a way that made the hospital room feel like it was slowly waking too. The daughter stood and opened the blinds a little more. Sunlight spilled across the floor, touching her grandfather's feet, then rising slowly to warm the blanket. "Tell me about your life," the daughter said gently to the old man. "Not the pain. The moments that mattered before everything changed." Her grandfather took a moment, gathering breath. I used to whistle on my way to work, he said, at the factory. People told me it annoyed them. I did it anyway. It made the day shorter. The daughter smiled. What did you whistle? He tried to hum the tune, his voice thin and wavering. The businessman recognized it first, a melody that tugged at a memory buried deep. You used to whistle that when I couldn't sleep, he said quietly. You'd sit by my bed until morning sometimes. His father nodded faintly. You were afraid of the dark, so I stayed until you weren't. And then, one day, the businessman said, his voice breaking, you weren't there anymore. The old man looked at him with sorrow that did not defend itself. I left because I thought I was the cause of the darkness, he whispered. I thought maybe you'd grow braver without me. The businessman closed his eyes, grief tightening every line of his face. I wasn't braver, he said. I was angrier. The daughter stepped closer, placing a hand on her father's back. The touch grounded him. He exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing beneath her palm. She looked at her grandfather with kind eyes. He learned to be strong, she said, but he didn't learn to be healed. The old man looked at his son. Can I ask you something? He whispered. Yes, his son replied. Why did you turn away last night? His father's voice broke on the question. When I asked for food. The truth pierced the businessman's chest. He sat back, eyes wet, the weight of the moment pressing into him. Because I didn't look, he said. Not really. I saw a stranger, not you. I saw what I didn't want to become. And I walked past the part of myself that needed compassion the most. His father reached for his son's hand, fingers trembling. I forgive you, he whispered. Those 3 words cracked something open inside the businessman. Tears slipped down his face, silently. He didn't wipe them away. His daughter took his other hand, completing the fragile circle. A long, quiet moment followed. Soft, heavy, necessary. Later, a hospital chaplain passed by the room, offering a gentle nod through the doorway. The old man smiled faintly at him as though recognizing a familiar kind of peace. After he left, the daughter asked, Grandpa, did you believe things would get better? All those years alone? He thought for a while before answering. Some nights, no, but most nights. I hoped. Hope is a stubborn thing. It stays even when we don't want it. He glanced at the paper cup sitting on the bedside table. The one he'd held in the rain, the one his son had once knocked aside. I held on to that cup because someone always put something in it. Not every day, but enough days, enough to keep walking. The businessman stepped closer, picking up the cup carefully, turning it over in his hands. And I pushed it away, he murmured. His father shook his head weakly. You pushed me away, he corrected gently. The cup was just part of it. The truth of that settled between them with a quiet weight. A soft knock came at the door. A nurse wheeled in a tray of soup and crackers. Nothing special, nothing fancy, but warm. Let's see if we can get him to eat a little, she said. She handed the tray to the daughter, who lifted a spoonful of broth to her grandfather's lips. He sipped slowly, the warmth spreading across his face. For the first time since the hospital lights had come on, he looked almost at ease. When the nurse stepped out again, the businessman pulled the chair closer, sitting so their faces were level. He took a breath, steadying himself. Dad, he said quietly, I want to tell you something I should have said years ago. His father's eyes met his, tired, expectant. I forgive you. The old man closed his eyes, a single tear sliding down his cheek. Thank you, he whispered. I've been waiting a long time. His granddaughter brushed the tear away with the gentlest touch, like she was handling something sacred. Outside, the day deepened, the light growing richer, warmer. The world beyond the window moved on. Cars passing, a woman walking her dog, a man waiting at the bus stop with his collar turned up against the breeze. Ordinary life. But inside the room, something extraordinary was happening in the quiet spaces between breaths. A family, broken long ago, was stitching itself back together. Not perfectly, but honestly. And sometimes, that is the kind of healing that lasts. Evening returned with a gentleness the day hadn't carried. The hospital lights dimmed slightly. Not enough to darken the room, but enough to soften it. Shadows settled into corners like old friends easing into familiar chairs. The old man rested more peacefully now, his breathing steadier, his face no longer tight with pain. Even his hands, those worn, trembling hands that had once held a baby against his chest, seemed to have loosened their fight. The businessman stood near the window, looking out at the city as it shifted from pale gold to deep blue. His reflection stared back at him, older, wearier, and finally honest. He'd spent decades building a life made of steel and glass, distance and pride. Tonight he felt all of it melt into something simpler. "Dad," his daughter said softly, "come sit." He turned, the word "dad" landing differently now. He walked back to the bed and sat beside his father, who stirred at the shift of weight. "You still here?" the old man whispered with a faint smile. "Yeah," his son answered. "I'm not leaving." His father nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Good. I was always afraid you'd walk away again." "I won't," the son said, and his voice didn't waver. A calm silence followed. Not the heavy, suffocating kind that had defined their past, but the quiet of people learning one another again. The daughter sat at her grandfather's other side, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Can I ask you both something?" she said. They looked toward her, waiting. "I know what happened between you. I know it hurt. But what do we do now?" Her voice trembled slightly. "How do we move forward?" Her grandfather took a long breath. "One day at a time," he said. "One truth at a time. One forgiveness at a time." Her father nodded, though his eyes drifted toward the floor. "I'm still learning how to put things down," he admitted. "Anger, expectations, the stories I told myself about him." His father gave a small, weary chuckle. "And I'm still learning how not to disappear when life gets hard." The daughter threaded her fingers gently through her grandfather's. "Then we learned together." A nurse entered quietly, checking machines with practiced efficiency before slipping out again, leaving them in a soft triangle of lamplight and tenderness. The old man shifted again, looking at his son with an expression that held both apology and pride. "I have something I need to say," he whispered. His son leaned closer. "I know you think I left because I didn't love you. But the truth is, I left because I loved you too much to let you see me breaking." His voice cracked. "I didn't want you to carry my failures, but you carried my absence instead, and that hurt you more." The son closed his eyes, tears slipping through them. "I would have carried anything," he said, "if I had known." His father raised a trembling hand, reaching for his son's face. The son guided it gently, letting those frail fingers rest against his cheek. It felt like placing a forgotten relic back into the hands of its rightful owner. "I didn't know how to be a father," the old man whispered, "but I wanted to be yours. I never stopped wanting that." "And I never stopped needing you," the son answered. The daughter watched them, her heart swollen with the beauty and ache of the moment. She stood and moved to the foot of the bed, where the old man's belongings sat in a small plastic bag. The gray coat, the worn shoes, and inside the pocket, a folded pamphlet from a shelter she recognized. She pulled it out gently and unfolded it. Written in shaky handwriting on the back were 3 words, "Maybe tomorrow, son." She breathed in sharply. Quietly, she held the paper out for her father to see. He took it slowly, reading the words as though each one carried the weight of a lifetime. His throat tightened. "He wrote this," he whispered. His father nodded weakly. "Every night, I told myself, maybe tomorrow would be the day I saw you again. Maybe tomorrow I'd be strong enough, brave enough." "And last night," the daughter said softly, "became the tomorrow you'd been waiting for." A long silence settled over them, filled with something neither sorrow nor joy could fully describe. It was the silence of truth landing where it needed to land. The old man's breathing grew a bit heavier. He wasn't in pain, just tired. Deeply, profoundly tired. His son adjusted the pillows behind him, offering support with careful arms. His daughter tucked the blanket around his legs, making sure he stayed warm. "This is more than I dreamed," the old man murmured. "To see you both, to know I wasn't forgotten." "You were never forgotten," the businessman said, "just misplaced in the wrong part of my heart." His father smiled, faint and flickering. "Then you found me." "Because she found me first," the son answered, glancing at his daughter with gratitude that made her eyes shimmer. The old man looked at her again, his expression full of something distant yet familiar. "Hope. You saved me," he whispered. She shook her head, squeezing his hand. "No. You held on long enough for us to find you." A deeper silence followed, the kind that feels like prayer without words. The son reached into his pocket and took out the paper cup, placing it gently on the bedside table. "We'll keep this," he said, "as a reminder." His father nodded. "Of what?" "Of who you were," he said gently. "Of who you are, and of what I almost lost, because I wasn't looking." The old man blinked slowly, emotion filling the small spaces in his voice. "You didn't lose me," he said softly. "I was just waiting, in the only place life left me." His granddaughter leaned in and kissed his forehead. "We'll make new places now." His father looked from his son to his granddaughter, his voice barely a breath. "You two, you're my tomorrow." The evening deepened. The sounds of the hospital grew quieter. Down the hall, someone laughed softly at a joke. Somewhere else, a machine beeped steadily. The scent of warm food drifted faintly past the door as dinner trays were delivered. And in that small room, under soft golden light, 3 generations rested together. Not fully healed, not fully mended, but bound by a truth that had finally come home. Dawn arrived with a gentleness that made the world feel new again. A pale blush of light seeped through the blinds of the hospital room, stretching across the floor, the chairs, and finally settling on the old man's face. He looked peaceful, as though sleep had finally found a place to rest inside him. His son sat in the same chair as the night before, leaning forward slightly, elbows on his knees, hands loosely clasped. His daughter stood near the window, watching the sky shift from soft gray to warm gold. When the old man woke, it was slow. The delicate flutter of eyelids, the small turn of his head, the faint breath that carried a whisper of morning. His son rose immediately, guiding him gently into a more upright position. "You're here," the old man murmured. "Still here," his son replied. "I'm not going anywhere." His daughter crossed the room and placed her hand on her grandfather's shoulder, smiling softly. "Good morning." The old man looked from one face to the other, surprise lingering in his tired eyes. Morning used to feel heavy, he said. Now it feels like beginning again. They stayed with him as the morning settled, sharing quiet stories, small memories, and gentle laughter. The fear of yesterday seemed to fade into something softer, like mist dissolving in sunlight. His son brought him warm water. His granddaughter combed his hair carefully with her fingers. There was a new kind of ease between them, as though they had all stepped into a room where the past's sharp edges had been sanded down by truth. Later that morning, a doctor came in, speaking calmly about care, rest, and recovery. The old man listened with gratitude, but turned his attention back to his family as soon as the doctor left. "I thought my story ended on the street," he said quietly. "But it ended here, with the two of you." His son shook his head. "It didn't end," he said. "It started again." The old man grew thoughtful, looking at the paper cup sitting on the table beside him. "You kept it." "The reminder matters," his son answered. "It teaches me where I was, and where I never want to be again." His father nodded, emotion rising in small tremors in his jaw. "And where do you want to be?" "Here," he said, "with you." A long silence followed, not one of sorrow, but of understanding. His daughter reached for the old pamphlet. She placed it gently in her grandfather's hands. The words, "Maybe tomorrow, son," stared up at him, not as a wound, but as a promise finally fulfilled. He breathed in, eyelids trembling, and pressed the paper to his chest. "I waited so long," he whispered, "longer than I ever thought I could." "You didn't wait alone," his son said. "You carried hope, even when you didn't have anything else." Time moved slowly the rest of the day. Nurses came in and out. Lunch trays arrived and were taken away. The sun shifted along the walls. The city outside pulsed with ordinary life. Cars passing, people talking, birds gathering along the ledge. Yet inside the room, everything felt still and sacred. In the afternoon, the old man fell asleep again, his breathing steady, his hand loosely holding his son's. His granddaughter stepped into the hallway to call her mother, telling her everything that had happened, her voice thick with emotion and relief. When she returned, she found her father watching his own reflection in the window. The same window he had stared through last night. "You look different," she said. He nodded. "I feel different." He paused. "Lighter and heavier, both." She smiled. "That's what healing feels like." When the old man woke again, he asked for something unexpected. "Take me outside," he murmured. "I want to feel the air." So they did. They moved slowly, carefully, guiding him into a wheelchair, draping his old coat over his shoulders. They walked through the halls, past rooms filled with people holding their own stories, until they reached the small courtyard behind the hospital. The afternoon had turned warm. Leaves scattered softly across the ground, stirred by a gentle breeze. A bench sat beneath a maple tree, its branches swaying slightly. The sunlight fell in broken patterns across their faces. The old man looked up at the sky, letting the wind brush against him. "I can breathe here," he said softly. His son knelt beside him, gripping the armrest. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, "for everything, for the years, for the anger, for not looking for you sooner." The old man laid his hand on his son's cheek, the same gesture that had begun their reconciliation the night before. "You came," he said. "That's all I ever wanted. You came. And we're here now," his granddaughter added gently. "All of us." A tear slipped down the old man's cheek, catching the sunlight. They stayed in the courtyard talking about small things, the weather, the tree, the city. But beneath those small talks lived something profound, a family repaired in the quietest way possible. At dusk, they guided him back to his room. The light grew dim again, but it no longer felt lonely. The old man settled beneath his blanket, holding tightly to the pamphlet and the paper cup, as if both were relics of a life he finally understood. Before falling asleep, he whispered, "Thank you for finding me." His son leaned close. "I didn't find you," he said. "Love did." The old man's eyes softened. "When the world turned away," he murmured, "love stayed." The lights dimmed. The daughter placed the photograph, the baby in the father's arm, on the bedside table, where it caught a small beam of light from the hallway. 3 generations were reflected in its frame. Outside, the city quieted. The night deepened. And somewhere in the stillness, a new story began. Not of loss this time, but of return. Because when the world turned away, love remained. If this story touched your heart, you're warmly invited to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so you won't miss the next story that heals. Your support helps these moments of human kindness reach more people who may need them. And if you'd like to continue this emotional journey, the next story is waiting for you on the screen. Another reminder that compassion still changes lives.